All right. The Mormon picture that's presented in Joseph Smith's official account, I keep calling it that because they made it scripture, and unless they want to throw it out and decanonize it or uncanonize it, whatever be the correct word, take it out of their canon of scripture, they're stuck with it. And in that account, Joseph claims that he moved, that his father came to Palmyra. He doesn't say whether he was with him or not. He just says his father moved to Palmyra in his 10th year. Now, if, as most Mormons understand, the 10th year means he's 10 years old, that would be the year 1816. Then he says that in about 4 years they moved from Palmyra to the joining township on the south of them, which was at that time called Farmington, but in just a couple of years later it was changed to, the name was changed to Manchester. So we call it Manchester, you know what we're talking about. Well, he says that 4 years they moved to Manchester, which would mean 1820. Mm-hmm. Then he says in the second year after their removal to Manchester, there was a great excitement on the subject of religion, and he goes on to say how he was stirred up by this and led to go out to the woods and prayed and had his first vision. Now, that would make the first vision story occur when he was in 1822, when he was 16. But then, having mentioned all that, he says, therefore, he went out to the woods on a beautiful spring day in the year 1820. So there is an inherent problem of chronology in his story, because he has the revival that stirred him up occurring in the first instance 2 years after he removed to Manchester, which would be 1822. He has himself moving there 4 years after arriving in Palmyra. Now, Mormons have handled this, and to get the revival back to 1820, and fit it in with his statement that it was a beautiful day, clear day in the spring of 1820, they have said that he moved to that farm of Manchester in 1818. And practically all Mormon scholars that I know of, all the leading BYU scholars, anyone that's written in the Ensign, has all gone with 1818 because they see that it's a problem. Now, a good Mormon friend of mine said to me, I wonder when the property went on the tax rolls to Joseph Smith. Well, since he didn't really own the property, and he simply contracted for it, I thought, well, that probably he wouldn't be on the tax rolls, and I doubt if the tax rolls existed. Nevertheless, I called the county, and being sent from one person to another, I finally wind up in talking to their newly hired archivist who had been searching out all the county documents he could find anywhere all over the whole place. And oddly enough, she had come upon, in the basement in Ontario County there, she had come upon the assessment tax rolls for that very period. So when I asked her if I could work with those, and she said certainly. So when I flew there and looked at the tax rolls, what I discovered was that the property was still on the tax rolls, all 300 acres of Lot 1, because that's the lot that was subdivided from which Joseph Smith had carved out his 100 acres and contracted for it. All 300 acres of Lot 1 were all taxed in July of 1820 to the heirs of Nicholas Everson. And Joseph's mother in her history mentions that they've contracted for this Everson land. So we're right on the right property there. And the following year, 1821 in July, why here for the first time the name of Joseph Smith appears on the tax rolls as paying taxes, owing property taxes on 100 acres on Lot 1. And when you looked at the Everson entry, the Everson property holdings on Lot 1 had dropped to 200 acres. So that the Smiths did not go on the tax roll until July of 1821. And there's no way they could have been on that property in 1818 or 1819 or even 1820 unless it was later in the year after the summer taxes had been assessed. So that seemed to suggest very strongly that it was either late in 1820, certainly not the spring, maybe the fall, or early in 21 before they even contracted for the property. Now, the second thing that happened, a friend of mine in Salt Lake City, talking to a Mormon researcher, had learned that the Brigham Young University had come across in 1970, when they were microfilming records in Palmyra, had come across the road tax records. So all of this got me into looking into the whole tax structure of that period and into how the road taxes were handled.
Now, what is a road tax? We're not familiar with that.
All right. Now, the way they maintained the roads in that time, they divided the whole township into road districts. And everybody living on a given road district that was age 21 or older was required to put in at least one day working to maintain the roads, filling in chuck holes, clearing brush, clearing trees, repairing bridges, in the wintertime, clearing the snow so they could get through. And if they failed to pay that in terms of labor, now they could hire somebody else to work in their place, but if they failed to fulfill the tax requirements, their property could be assessed and they could be fined and even jailed, or their property put up for sale. So that's the way they maintained the roads. And the state law in New York required that the town meeting for each of the townships be held in the first Tuesday in April, and that's when all the people were elected. And 3 road supervisors were to be elected, and all the overseers of the different road districts were to be elected. And it goes on to specify that each overseer in his district was to make a list of all the people that were required to be taxed, that is 21 years of age or older. And that was submitted then to the 3 township supervisors of roads, of highways. And this was a composite list was made, and the clerk of the town was required to record this. Now, this list, starting in 1804 and going through to the 1840s, had been consistently kept throughout the years, and this was one of the items that type transcript of that was microfilmed by Brigham Young University. And this researcher had discovered that in 1817, Joseph Smith's name, and of course it would have to be Joseph Sr. because Joseph Jr. was still under 21 years of age at the time, that Joseph Smith's name first appears on District 26 of these highway tax rolls. And so he is living in Palmyra